Appamada's programs and facilities are supported through your generosity. Your support really does make a huge difference. You'll find a link for contributions on the website at appamada.org/contribute. Thank you so much.
So, okay, well, welcome. It's the Precepts gathering for March 5th, 2023. I'm going to be presenting today with Jessica Steinbaumer, who is coming in to talk about one of the traditional topics for the second meeting of the Precepts group, which is Hakomi, and how Hakomi intersects with Buddhist teaching and as a truthfulness and compassion. So we'll get started in just a minute with a few minutes of sitting, but I want to just quickly go through the lineup of what I hope to cover today. So I want to sit until about 10 minutes after the hour here, 1:10 Central Standard Time. And then I want to ask for about a period of about 20 minutes for people to share what they came up with in recasting of the precepts from the assignment, which I only got to you on Thursday this week. Because I was so late, in case there's nothing that people want to share, I've got some other stuff I can read to occupy that time. But I think it'd be really great if this were not me talking so much this time. And then after that, starting at about 1:40 p.m. Central Time, Jessica will give the talk that she has planned about Hakomi and loving presence. And then we will have a small group interaction that will last about 20 minutes. And after that, we'll have 10 minutes for group sharing of anything that anybody wants to share with the whole group after that small group experience, and then a few closing remarks. Okay? So let's sit together. I'm going to ring a bell. It's okay. And let me say, during this sitting time, please hold Claudine Booth, who was going to be our online monitor. Hold her in your thoughts. She emailed me early this morning that she was in the hospital, and I don't know exactly what that means, but let's hold her in our thoughts, okay? So thank you so much, and welcome to all those, Brian and Chris, Ashoka, Meredith, and others whom I'm having trouble following here, but anybody whom I did not greet before, thank you so much for joining us. I have just a few things that I want to share about some further thoughts on speaking truthfully and how that connects with the Eightfold Path. And then Jessica has a very beautiful expression of the Eightfold, of how speaking truthfully is a way of not just of examining ourselves, but of really opening to the world and engaging with others in the world. So Diane Rizzetto, in her guidance for exercises for examining this precept, she says we need to see where we hide out in order to see how we speak the truth and how we sometimes feel that we don't want to speak the truth. And she talks about common ethical dilemmas that we face in telling the truth. And reading that, I am reminded that Buddhists don't own any of the ethical paths that the Buddha described. He was a great teacher, but other people come up with great liberating insights that can have a real impact. And I will say, I used to go to Rotary Club meetings when I was a fundraiser for McDonald Observatory and the Department of Astronomy. Usually, I was accompanying my boss, the director of the observatory, or one of the senior scientists, and he would talk about galaxies and dark energy and dark matter, and why people should support astronomy, a relatively abstruse physical science. And what I was struck by was that at the beginning of Rotary Club meetings, there's a good deal of religiosity. There's a prayer, there's patriotism, and so on. One of the elements at the beginning of every Rotary Club meeting is what they call the four-way test, which is now actually owned by the Rotary Clubs. But it is something that was developed by a businessman in the 1930s. And the four-way test is a guide to thought, action, and activity. And it goes, does anybody know this offhand? Anybody go to Rotary Club meetings? It's very instructive. The four-way test is it true? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? And will it be beneficial to all concerned? It turns out that this statement was developed by a man named Herbert J. Taylor, a businessman who was active from the 1920s to the 1970s in Christian organizations throughout the country. In 1932, he was an executive with an Illinois-based company called Club Aluminum Products. They distributed aluminum products around the country. And it was 1932, his company was about to go bankrupt. And instead of focusing only on cost cutting and marketing and other things that go with a business kind of mindset, he undertook what we might call a period of introspection and discernment. And he decided that what the company most needed was a revamping of its ethical environment. And he came up with the four-way test. And he then shared it with other people who enthusiastically embraced it throughout the country. And it turned the company around. He was an enthusiastic member of the Rotary Club, and he shared it with other people. And as he became an executive with Rotary, it was adopted by them. So as I've been working with the Precept, and pardon me, I looked down to look at my papers. Kim told me last time that because of the way my camera is set up, that when I look at my papers, it seems like, I'm just kind of checking out of the meeting. I'm sorry about that. I'll try and hold my papers up higher here. So it's not so bad. But when I've been working with the Precept, I take up the way of speaking truthfully. I consider how my words grow out of my thoughts. And can my thoughts be truthful if I'm lost in a self-centered dream and not considering the situation in terms of what is fair to all the people concerned? And how do my thoughts and words change if I am actively engaging in building goodwill and friendship, and in searching beyond my first impulses to find what will be beneficial to all concerned? To me, that's a liberating insight. And I'm reminded of the quote that I sent out last week and that I included in my talk a month ago from Robert Rosenblatt. The precepts provide structures to support us, for forums to pour ourselves into, means to strengthen our moral muscles so that our bones can take us where our intentions aim. They need to be actualized in concrete actions that fit specific situations. If the way we deal with a situation fosters a sense of mutuality, that's a sign we're acting in accordance with the precepts. When we create paths wide enough to make room for everyone, we are traipsing through the terrain of interbeing, in the famous portmanteau word of Thich Nhat Hanh, interbeing. The teaching of the Dharma is simple. We are all in this together. So I'll stop there. And Jessica, now I've lost you on the screen. There you are. Jessica, would you share that formulation that you shared with me the other day as a guide also?
I'm sorry.
Or it had to do with the kind of, in Hakomi terms and in terms of loving presence, how to think of this precept.
Oh, sure.
To me. And you didn't know that I was going to call on you to share this because you didn't get my email yesterday.
Well, I do. So Joel and I were just talking about this precept, and I was thinking about how the practice of Hakomi, which is a body-centered method, how it applies. And there's a couple of things that have come to mind. And chatting with Anne today, even more became available. Just thinking about the body as an instrument, and checking in with our bodies. So just to even begin, like when we're speaking to one another, and noticing these 4 things that Joel has mentioned, we can check in with our bodies. Does this feel true? Does this feel kind? And my body is a good place to even start to notice that. And it's very telling. Our heart might start racing, or we might feel tension in our shoulders. So these are some of the things that Hakomi might open the door for us to be able to check into. And then I also was just thinking about the precept of speaking truthfully. And for me, practicing this, of course, I will practice my speech, but practicing in a Mahayana way, to me, means that we help others to speak truthfully as well. So we practice speaking truthfully, and we make it feel easy for others to do so. And we do this by listening deeply and attending with loving presence. So making the field loving and safe for another person to be their wholehearted, authentic, truthful self also feels like practicing with this precept in terms of listening. So I felt like it really is on both sides. It's the active speaking, or holding back from speaking, but also the active listening, and the ways that we listen to one another. Whether we're just waiting to talk, or whether we're truly attending to what the person is saying, and inviting them to speak truthfully, just with our presence. So I hope that's what you meant, Joel. And then
That's exactly what I meant. Yes.
Okay, I do have a few slides prepared whenever you're ready for me for that.
Okay, so first we're going to have some time for people to share their recastings, their rewording or reworking of this precept, of how they've been working with it in the last month since we met, how they've been, how they react to the reading they've done, and thinking about how it applies in their lives. So if you are willing, take a deep breath. I know it's scary to be called on, but if you're willing to share anything at all, please raise your hand so that I can call on you. Raise your electronic hand if you can, so that I may call on you and you will get a chance. So we have 37 people online and only 20 minutes for this, so there won't be time for everyone to speak at any kind of length. But I encourage everyone to please share what you can about your thoughts and your reactions to this very important precept. I mean, in the casting of in the traditional form of the precepts, not killing comes first. And yet here, Diane Rizzetto has put this one first. Why do you think that is? It's because I think it's so foundational that as a practice of learning from the precepts, that we aspire to be truthful with ourselves and with others. So, okay, having said all that, we're pretty much on time. And Becky, would you speak first, please?
Yes. I had difficulty to even step into the question and so on, because truth telling is such a big thing that I couldn't frame it down. But I'd like to start first with a very short story that some of you have heard before that helped me into speaking it. When my elder daughter, Rachel, was 3 years old, we were having a toe-to-toe argument. At one point, I responded to her, "Rachel, that's just not true." And she looked me directly in my eyes and said, "Your truth is not my truth." From that, I was like, after I sort of looked at that again, I wrote down what is current for me right now in exploring this precept. I take up the way of curiously exploring the myriad aspects and often subtle aspects of truth-telling, including careful listening, pausing and looking inward, silence, skillful means, and then the dots about all the things that go on and on beyond that. So it's big and it's deep, and it can go on the rest of our lives, I think, because each one shows us another subtle next, and that's exciting.
Thank you, Becky. Pam?
Good morning.
Good morning.
What I wrote is, I take up the practice of being truthful as manifested in my actions and my speech. Oftentimes my speech is muted or not really available to me, so I speak with my actions instead. So that's important to me.
Shelley, welcome.
Thank you. I was trying to rewrite this in a short form, and I found it was impossible. So I'll just read what I wrote. I awaken to the truths, both those I have not yet seen and those that I have seen and avoid. I sit with these emerging truths and imagine different ways I could name them. Sometimes I'm able to wait for phrases steeped with deep compassion for myself and others before I speak. Sometimes I find those phrases only after I have spoken.
Thank you, Shelley. In my prompt about writing for this, I spent a good deal of time talking about the parts within us that often seem to be acting at cross purposes or have conflicting emotions that they carry and that need acknowledgement so that we can move forward in a way that is fair to ourselves, fair to the other people that we're dealing with, and acknowledges that complicated thing that Becky was talking about, that her truth at one moment may not be the truth of the other person at that moment, and that happens inside us as well. So, Shelley, thank you so much for sharing that. Ed? Oh, I see Liz is up next.
Hi, everyone. Gosh, this is a huge topic, and I set a timer for 15 minutes and wrote on the prompt, so I'm not going to read you what I wrote, but I think similar to what Becky was saying, and to echo some of your sentiments, Joel, I think what came through for me is really, it's important to make sure that what truth even is for me before I speak. Otherwise, it's really an unfiltered, parts triggered, not necessarily compassionate for myself, feeling like I'm rushing to get out of discomfort and throwing the fireball of my truth at someone else. And being okay with, once I'm clear with what my truth actually is, then I'll be okay with someone else's truth not being the same as mine. I have to be clear about my intention for why I'm speaking the truth. I don't want to do it to manipulate someone into believing what I think is true, and really just getting really quiet to make sure that all of that is happening before I speak anything. I also can get a little sneaky about hiding my truth, because that was a coping mechanism as a kid. It was just a safety thing. So I notice when I'm doing that more and more as I've healed over a period of long time. And just really slowing down and giving myself space. Like I don't have to hurry through the process. So those were a few nuggets came through. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. Ed, hi. You're still muted. Good.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Obviously, very complicated, very multi-level precept to work with. And I started off trying to notate, to almost stream of consciousness, write down things that came up, and looking at this precept and having read it before and trying to apply it for a while now. And some of the things that popped up were like, even if you're intending to speak with awareness and intention, and listen, the person or persons on the other end, it's kind of an open-ended gate, because what do they preconceive by looking at you? What do they preconceive or won't listen to by the tone of voice or by the actual words that you're using? And words being so incredibly powerful and having meanings which not always shared between each other. It just helps to add to the complexity of this thing, but it also means that this has such an ultimate priority to be able to do things and move forward, which is probably one of the reasons why she put this one first. But after doing my Dostoevsky long sentences and thoughts, I came up with this. And it is kind of a living statement, I think. I take up the way of continuously applying awareness and intention in speaking, not speaking, and listening through conscious interaction and relationship with self and others.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you. Genevieve, welcome.
Hello. First, may I ask a question?
Yes.
I'm a little confused about, so if we're meant to spend a month on each precept, were we meant to have spent last month on this precept or the month that's coming?
Last month.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Sorry, that was not clear. So, and next month will be the next chapter.
Okay.
And I'll talk about that later.
Okay. All right. Well, I feel a little behind, but I'll do my best. What I wrote was, I take up the way of being curious about my communications and identifying the motivations behind them. I seek to feel the conditions that drive me and compare these with my intentions. And I also can't help thinking of Flint's, is it true? Is it kind? Does it need to be said? Because I said something a couple of days ago that was true, but I don't know if it was as kind or as necessary as I thought it was. And it has created quite some turmoil. So just wanted to add that possible question.
This is a fathomless subject, and you are pointing to that. Thank you. Thank you, Jaya. Sean, welcome.
Thank you. So yeah, I'll just read what my reinterpretation after some journaling and thought of this precept. And this is just the first step of me trying to work with it. So to me, what I started to feel was this was less about literally determining fact from fiction logically, and more about striving to always speak in a way that resonates all the way through your entire psyche, transcending Gordian knots and cognitive dissonance that can arise when carrying ill-fitting beliefs or lenses on reality.
What I hear again is an echo of what I was trying to point to, and what Genevieve just pointed to. Also, that it's not just intellectual, that you can't avoid that, but to the extent that you are engaged in including others, to being fair to other people, true and kind, and is it necessary to be said? Those are also guides, and that those can get into places in your psyche that the question of is this true or not? Intellectually can't reach. Does that seem right?
Yes, that's kind of what I'm trying to get at and point at.
Yeah.
To me, it's less of a logical left brain enterprise and more of a felt sense that strikes through, pierces the veil in a certain way.
There you go. And of course, Jessica's going to be talking more about that later on. So, all right. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you.
Hi, Bob. Welcome.
Hi, Joel. Good to see you.
Such a beautiful color you're wearing.
Thank you. Yeah, my blue. It's my blue state.
Yeah.
I'm going to just read kind of what came to me on Thursday when I first received this, because it's a work in progress, as I think we've kind of mentioned a couple of times. I take up the way of a daily practice of engaged mindfulness with my words and thoughts, in parentheses, thoughts that precede my words, focusing on being honest with myself, all others, and all aspects of life as it really is. As well, I take up the way to a daily practice that examines my feelings and beliefs that consciously and subconsciously allow me to be honest with each of these groups. Thank you.
Thank you. So again, you're pointing to this kind of fathomless quality. There's subconscious things going on in all of us, and to allow time for them to come forward, to work on it, not grinding at it, but holding the aspiration daily to be with the things that we don't even know that we're thinking, and let them come forward and see how they are. That is a great practice.
It's that moment between having an understanding and then having the awareness of what might be happening before I actually make it happen.
Isn't that amazing to be able to have
it's a good
that
practice,
to have that capacity for these things that are in fact happening in microseconds?
It's the trapeze artist, right, as they reach that point of weightlessness, or before the commitment occurs.
Weightlessness, that's a lot more inviting than the dead zone to me.
Yes.
Much better, much more appealing metaphor. All right, thank you, Bob. Ashoka, am I saying your name right? Does the S have a SH sound?
It's Ahsoka.
Ahsoka, pardon me. Thank you.
When I was reflecting on it this week, I was thinking about all the times I've lied in my life and then given myself a hard time about it. And then I thought I can't go back and change things that I've done in the past, but I can change who I am now. And I can use what's happened in the past as a way of creating discernment for knowing what's appropriate. And what was it I was going to say? Completely forgotten, sorry.
Let me just ask you. Okay,
Jessica,
go ahead.
Jessica, she was talking about the body, and while she was talking about it, I was thinking, if you can get to a deep place inside, there's a sort of place deep down where it sort of resonates, and you're you feel, if you sometimes if it's the surface level of the mind, it's hard to feel what's true sometimes, because you can talk yourself into something that isn't true and get deluded about it. So sometimes you can go into a deep place, but that can help me. It's like I notice I feel a bit afraid at the moment because I'm on camera, but if I go deep in, I feel a bit more composure and a bit less, more like I'm speaking from a core of my being or something, which makes me feel more truthful. So I wrote this. I will speak truthfully. Truth is the antidote to delusion. Without truth, not much progress will be made in the spiritual life. The power of the truth also has the power to heal. There are stories in the Buddhist sutras where disciples spoke or chanted truths to sick people, and the power of that truth healed them. But I should also use discernment when speaking truthfully, and only do so if it is kind, beneficial, and appropriate. Otherwise, I'll practice noble silence.
Thank you, Richie. Thank you. That was perfect. And it comes from a deep place in you, I know. Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
So we've only got 3 or 4 more minutes left. I'm sorry. So Chris, welcome.
Thank you, Joel. The more I sit with this, the more things are attached to it. It's kind of astonishing. And so I'm trying to distill all that down into 2 or 3 sentences as sort of a subtitle. But it's all in process. But I came up against a dimension that I hadn't really thought about much. In the past month, twice, I appear to have alienated 2 people who I don't know well, maybe permanently. The first was a Hispanic man who was doing some plumbing work for me. And I liked the guy. We had some nice chat while he was here. And he did part of the job and then was going to come back a week or 2 later to finish it. And he texted me and said, I can't come this weekend. It'll have to be another week. And I wrote back, no problem. The faucet ain't going nowhere. And that's what I wrote, ain't going nowhere. And he didn't reply. And I texted him again and he didn't reply. And the only reason I can come up with that he didn't reply was that he thought I was being patronizing or talking down to him with ain't or going. And that's natural speech for me. I love informal speech. But I know that some people take that as talking down, of trying to get to a level of communication that isn't legitimately mine. So he hasn't replied. And the same thing happened with a Black woman who is family, another branch. We only discovered each other like 2 years ago. And so the last thing I wrote to her, I was talking about Texas weather and said something like, it's so hot down here. We're sweltering in more than just the heat of injustice, which is a line from Martin Luther King. And I think the same thing happened because she has not replied. I did send an apology to the Hispanic man, no reply. I'm going to send an apology to the Black woman, but I was not sufficiently aware of how my words would land with them. It's a cultural thing. And so I'm looking at that really hard now, monitoring myself. And the answer may be that I need to just drop those things from my speech. They're not necessary. And I would much rather be careful not to offend than insist on talking in a way that I like, that's comfortable. So that's what's coming out of this for me right now.
Thank you, Chris. I'd love to talk to you more about this at another time.
Good.
Thank you. Thank you so much for everyone who has come forward. So what I want to ask now is if Jessica Steinbaumer will talk to us about Hakomi and its intersection with speaking the truth and being kind and being cognizant of others and others also within ourselves. So, Jessica?
Yeah, thank you so much, Joel, for having me, and thanks everyone. And I think Denise, I think the word she was using was nurturing.
Okay,
and
good.
I believe if that's not true, Denise, let me
Oh,
know.
good.
But is that right, Denise? Okay. And so we're actually gonna invite some of that nurturance. So what a wonderful segue to have happened organically. And so today I just wanted to offer the practice, the play, the enjoyment of loving presence. And as this relates to this precept, as I mentioned a little bit before, about listening and speaking. And so, yeah, let me just go ahead and share my screen. Okay, can y'all see that? Okay, great. So this is, initially, this is just a quote from Ron Kurtz, the developer of Hakomi, or the person who initially kind of thought of and named Hakomi. And really, the first thing to just get out of this is that the state of the listener or speaker is the most important thing. So whatever state we're coming from, and this refers to your mindset as well as to your body. You know, what state your body is in, your nervous system, your heart. But Ron says, I introduced the idea of loving presence as the most supportive state of mind for the therapist. And here he's talking about therapy, but really we can apply this to our daily lives as well. That one change placed the ultimate power of the work in something more than the method and techniques. I realized that the real source of the method's effectiveness is the therapist's capacity to be loving towards and completely present for the client. So this is speaking, you know, about how we are bringing ourselves to interactions, to one another. And so I looked to our teacher, Donna Martin, for her description of loving presence. And she breaks it down into 3 steps. And this is something that we're kind of continually doing, right, in the background of our minds and our hearts. But I really appreciated just sort of unpacking it a little bit, you know. So she says there's 3 steps to preparing ourselves or to stepping into loving presence. Initially, she describes loving presence as a way that is being receptive. So we're shifting from pushing out to being more concave. So instead of me trying to communicate my point of view, I'm becoming a receptor, a receiver, an active listener. And then the quality of gratitude is there. And a final note is just that there's just nothing to do. And I think that this is such a practice edge, right? Because we oftentimes there is something that we need to communicate, or that we need to get done. And so this is not to say that the practice of loving presence is passive. In fact, to me, it's probably the most active I can be. But this is, I think, a little bit more about being attached to outcome or something that I'm trying to control. So the first step is mindfulness, right? Becoming aware and notice what is already happening. So as you invite a loving presence inside of yourself, notice what's happening inside of you. Invite a self-awareness to notice your current state. And this allows us to be with life as it is, right? And in the moment. But also we're quieting our state. So we're inhibiting our normal habits and impulses to react in order to be more receptive. So this is a two-part first step. Notice what's happening. This is where we're tuning into our body, we're tuning into ourselves, we're allowing ourselves to be in the equation, and we're quieting ourselves and inhibiting that normal habit or impulse in order to be more receptive. So right now you can just do this if you'd like. Just ground back into your body. You know, you might have been like going out, looking into the screen. Certainly we've all been feeling one another and affected by each other's sharing. So you might just feel where your feet are connected to the floor. Feel the support of the chair beneath you. Tune into your breath. And just bring yourself into the present moment and give your body a moment to check in with you. The second thing to invite loving presence is seeing deeply, or as Donna says, seeing through. And this is the non-habitual way of seeing. It's seeing the storyteller behind the story. And I think it's really curiosity. So we become aware, we notice what's happening inside of ourselves, we set aside any reactivity or impulses or conditioning in order to actively take in that person with us. And then we intend to see them deeply. We intend to see the storyteller behind the story. And then we allow nourishment. And this is why I was heartened by what Denise was saying, because in order for us to be present with others, we need to be resourced in ourselves. And so here we're taking in the beauty of the other person, something inspiring about that person as a source of nourishment for ourselves, in the same way you'd be gifted by a beautiful sunset. And we're actively searching for beauty and inspiration in each moment. And this active searching for beauty and inspiration in the other person becomes tangible to the other person. And we call this non-egocentric nourishment. And so you can do that right now. You can find something simple, even in the room around you. It may be the beautiful way the light is shining through your window. It may be that you're looking at the screen and you're seeing someone's countenance that's receptive, or the color of someone's eye. It can be anything that feels beautiful and inspiring to you as a source of nourishment. So as you can see from this description of loving presence, it's very active, it's very alive, and as we're speaking to one another, if we're speaking in loving presence, if either we're the speaker or the listener, we're doing this. So we're allowing the nourishment for ourselves and hopefully offering nourishment to another. And so lastly, as we move into this exercise that Joel will describe, or that maybe Joel and I will describe together, I invite you to just notice initially, is the field loving? Is what we're transmitting here serving the greater good? And here's just some, bullet list of things that might feel nourishing to you, or things that you can remember as you're connecting with one another. Like, for example, an innate trust that everything is connected. So as you're listening, as you're the listener or the speaker, there can just be this background trust that whatever is showing up is connected with what is unfolding. And then remembering to be generous with yourself and continuing to nourish yourself so that we can keep going, right? So that we can keep attending to one another and keep bringing our fully present selves. And I won't read all of these, but I just would like to end by saying, you matter. You matter. You're a gift to this group, your presence. So thank you all so much for being here and for bringing the you that you are. Thank you.
Jessica, are you able to, I saw confidential on one of the slides, and I'm wondering, are you able to share the slides with the group through
Sure.
our Google Groups page? I think that would be very useful, certainly for me.
Absolutely. I'll connect with you about how to do that. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Okay, well, we're doing pretty well on time, which I'm delighted to say. Thank you. But what I want people to do is to spend some time holding, I'm going to read what I've got written rather than try and extemporize that. Spend 5 minutes in silence. Each person, you'll need, in your group, you'll need to designate a timekeeper. So there'll be 5 minutes set aside for silence. During each person explores places where they hide out, as Diane Rizzetto says. And to me, this means taking a backward step and contacting, doing a body scan, breathing deeply, getting grounded, and then from a place of compassion and openness, opening to inner experience and contacting parts that have now or have in the past felt compelled to resort to speaking untruthfully. Or I would say, in reflection on what Chris shared before, where out of a kind of innocent ignorance, pardon me, having used a term that strikes another person in a way that breaks a connection and that causes pain for yourself and for others. Let those parts come forward and listen to what they say or how they feel in your body. And hold those parts without judgment. And listen to what they say again, or share how they feel when they affect your body, when they come forward. At the end of that period, there'll be a bell or some kind of signal from the timekeeper, and then each person in the group will have 1 minute. If you are willing, you can pass, but you will have 1 minute to either be silent or to talk about the contact with those parts. So some of these things have been shared before, but this will give everyone a chance, if they want it, to be able to speak. And while you are speaking, you will be held in the loving presence that Jessica has just described by the other people in your group. So you have a very important role as a listener as well as a speaker. So I'm inviting people to get called on to speak, but also to over and over again to invoke this feeling of loving presence and compassion that Jessica was just so well describing. At the end of those 4 minutes, or 3 minutes if you're in a 3-person group, you may take some time, if you're willing, up to a minute each, to reflect on what you heard as listeners and or perhaps on the experience of focusing and holding others within loving presence and how that feels for you in your body, in your mind, how you see that guiding your work with this precept in the future. Okay, so 5 minutes to think, sit and feel, and hold yourself within loving presence while other people are with you. 1 minute each to share, and if you are the listener, to actively engage in this kind of concave energy. That's a beautiful image, I think, instead of moving out of convexity into concavity and welcoming and doing that. And then a few minutes to share. So, and then at the end, which will be at 15 minutes from the start of the group, Rosemary will bring us all back together, and we'll have the opportunity to share with the wider group for anyone who is willing to do that, and nobody's on the spot to have to do that. Okay. We have about 5 minutes. If anyone would like to share thoughts about the experience of participating in that small group exercise. I'm going to add my comments on it online because they're complicated and I got a big surprise out of it. But I welcome all comments. So Joni, welcome.
Thank you, Joel, so much. Just really grateful for this circle of lovely people that are willing to be vulnerable. And that's pretty much what I was experiencing, is that vulnerability, that fear of vulnerability, and allowing myself to nourish and have compassion for myself as I anticipated speaking for a minute with people I'd never met before, and noticing the sensations in my body and giving myself that loving awareness that I needed to be able to calm down the fear of vulnerability that arose in me. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Joni. Pam.
Thank you. I am, this is a vulnerable moment for me. I lost my internet during the discussion, so I disappeared from my group, and I'm not real savvy with this and was assigned into another group. So I went in there, and then a pop-up came up on my computer. And so I X'd out of it, and then I was out of everything again. So I did get the hug. Thank you. And ironically, one of the ways that I do hide out is by disappearing. And this was not done intentionally, but that is one of the ways that I do. I detest taking up time. So the fact that I'm sharing towards the beginning of the share groups twice during this is very uncomfortable to me. And when I just was sitting with it, what came up is that to get out of one of my hiding places is doing things, or just I'll just leave it there, just doing things or being helpful. And unfortunately, I didn't get to experience the rest of it, but that's that. Yeah.
Thanks, Pam. That is so uncomfortable when like an objective correlative pops up and you recognize it that way. It happens to me all the time. That's all I can say. And thank you for pointing that out. I'm sorry that that technical thing happened that wasn't and added to your discomfort. So I'm just enjoying having a chance to. It is just astonishing to me, even in the low resolution, even in the tiny little windows that we have here, how much emotion can get conveyed from the movement of an eyebrow or the way a shadow falls across a face in this environment. It's just astonishing. Thank you so much for bringing what you for bringing everything that you have brought today. So we're getting close to the end of our time. Let me say that my apologies for not being clear about the reading and the assignment and everything for this time. So let me read one quick thing that I put together here, if I can find it. So the Buddha talked in the Eightfold Path about right speech. It is the third element of the Eightfold Path and the beginning of the right action sequence within the Eightfold Path. And I was reading by a writing from a woman named Barbara O'Brien, who writes on Reddit and all sorts of forums on the internet, and is obviously a very skilled writer and a very deep practitioner of Buddhism. And she writes, the basics of right speech as recorded in the Pali Canon. The Buddha said that right speech has four parts: abstain from false speech, do not tell lies or deceive, do not slander others or speak in a way that causes disharmony or enmity, abstain from rude, impolite, or abusive language, and do not indulge in idle talk or gossip. So far, we have been talking about the precept of speaking truthfully as kind of the first element of what the Buddha describes as right speech, and that the other elements contained within right speech are in fact the subjects of the next two chapters in Diane Rizzetto's book, the chapter entitled, hang on, Speaking of Others with Openness and Possibility, and Meeting Others on Equal Ground. That the elements having to do with speech show up in both those chapters as well, and they have to do with how we are thinking about others, and whether or not we are being fair to them, whether or not we are allowing their viewpoints in to help us get out of our own self-centered dream, those elements. So that's the plan for next time. Please read both those chapters, and then I'll give you an assignment that will draw on both of those chapters for something to share with the group for next time.
So Joel, can I ask a question?
Yes.
So just to be clear, we're doing chapters 6 and 7. We're reading them, but we're also working with those two precepts in the month.
That's right.
Okay.
And then for next month, we will also be working with elements of both of those for the month after that. So between now and the 2nd of April, which will be our next meeting, please read those chapters and work with them, and use the suggestions that Diane Rizzetto has for ways to work with them. Okay, and see how they echo back toward the work in this chapter and the work of speaking truthfully. Okay, Thank you for that question, Rosemary. And any further questions? Okay. It will be the same length as we had for this time. And anyway, I will make sure about that. Thank you so much for this. All right. We have reached the end of our time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joel. Take care, mate.
Thank you.
Yeah, take care, everyone.
Thank you.